president of DAMA RVA.
I'm not going to use a mic that over the.
Okay, I'll try to do that. I'm Terry Marston. I'm the president of DAMA RVA. We are the Richmond chapter of Data Management International. Our goal is to bring data professionals together for conversation, for to help discuss problems, see what's going on with you guys. Our mission is to be an essential resource to those who engage in information and data management. So that's what we're trying to do. This is our second DAMA Day, and we're really excited to do this. Our primary meetings are our monthly virtual meetings. We do it at the second Friday of every month from 12 to 1. We've had a lot of really good speakers. We try to leave some time for engagement, for questions, try to make it a little more interactive and a little less preachy. So we hope that you'll join us at those. They do tend to be, we have had some great content. We've had some really wonderful speakers. Let's see. Yeah, no, I did that part. So I wanted to thank our sponsors. We have CapTech, which is the building we're in. They have been supportive in our planning sessions. They help with our website. So we're really grateful to have CapTech as a member of our community. We've also got Right Data and Measure Consulting, and their tables are back here, and you'll hear from them a little bit in the middle of the presentation. So we hope that you'll talk to them and say hello. They are the reason we can make this happen for you. So please support them. The bathrooms, if you need them, are right outside the front door, just kind of down the hall there. There's some signs. I think that's it. So this is Peter Aiken, who we all know and love. And he is going to lead our session today.
So it's my great privilege to host this conversation on this. Now, how many of you consider yourself data leaders? Data leaders. Okay, good. The rest of you actually are data leaders as well, because you're probably the most data literate person in your organization. That means that awesome responsibility falls on your shoulders. And despite the fact that I've been an academic for 30 years, we haven't managed to put this stuff in the curriculum yet. So when you come out of here and you want to get a job with some really wonderful people like this, or work for CapTech or something, you have to learn it on your own. Giovanni, did we teach you the things you needed to be a data consultant in school? Did we teach you the things you needed to be a data consultant in school? I can answer that. Yeah. That's because she was able to do a little bit more than the standard curriculum. I was actually just talking to the guys in the back. Our curriculum is actually about 15 years out of date still, and that'll be one of the things we talk about. But right at the moment, the average chief data officer is in their job for, anybody know how long? 3.5 years. 3.5 is a really optimistic number. We're actually seeing 18 months as the standard piece. These two wonderful individuals have been in this position since they were 1 year old. They're both 20. And so we have this great opportunity where we have this wonderful talent here in town to sort of pick and pull their brains and find out what has worked for them. So they have both gone through a number of different organizations. I'll let them introduce themselves in a little bit, but of course we have to start out with a little bit of fun here first of all. So we asked, of course, the AI components in here to give us a what should our logo look like?
It's scary. It's like.
So I asked AI, what is data leadership? And look at what it did. It gave us 2 white males. Couldn't even spell it either. So. We're going to cover a series of topics, and we'll sort of break here, but I really want to make this as interactive as it possibly can be, so that you guys get the questions you want to have answered. So I have things to start the topic. These guys have been working on these topics for many, many years, have done this dog and pony show before. If you haven't had a chance to see them together, it's kind of like yin and yang. They really work well together.
Actually, this is Karen and I were just laughing. This is how we catch up, which is we do these events and
in front of people.
In front of people, that's great. So we hope you'll engage with us and not make this a monologue from either one of us.
That'd be really boring.
Yeah.
Kathy Knox is actually the first CEO in the entire world. And started out in 1985, I think?
89.
89. Capital One decided that data was kind of an important part of their business. And Karen was not far behind. But they both have again, literally 25 years of data leadership among the two of them. And we are so fortunate to have them here today. I'm going to jump right in. Here's our topic list. They both took some different pathways to get to data leadership. That's kind of an interesting topic. We'll get into that. The typical way, the second topic is attracting and retaining data talent. And I think that's actually wrong. I think it really is much more about building teams and skill sets around it. I think you'll hear that as they talk through the presentations. We're going to dive a little bit into succession planning, because as soon as you get in your job, you've got to make sure that you've got somebody else ready to go. Or else whatever you do is just going to, well, Kathy did that, but Karen did that, but, and then it doesn't happen after that. So you've got to have that in place. What are the things to focus on? What do you do when you're looking at strategy from a data perspective? How do you unlock business value? That's really the bottom line in an awful lot of these items. If you're not able to show that there's some tangible benefit. Yeah, I reorganized the database. The world goes, so what? Right? But if now you can say, well, therefore the salespeople are going to be more able to grab what they're looking for. So, you know, how do you manage upwards? Because none of your bosses know as much as you do, and that's true for everybody in this room. We'll get to ethics and AIs as well. So I'm going to ask, first of all, each of them to talk a little bit about how they got here. So we'll start out with the path to data leadership on this. Who wants to go first?
You want me to go first, really? Yeah. All right. I actually didn't start out in the data field. I actually started out going to school for recreation. I have a master's degree in, I have a master's degree in recreation, gerontology, study of aging. And to put myself through graduate school, I actually worked at VCU as a grad assistantship doing all the quality assurance on data and reporting for their financial aid office. And the reason I was able to do that is my dad, he actually worked at IBM, and he taught me how to computer program when I was in elementary school. And I was just always good at math also. And I thought that the whole like computer programming was a normal thing that everyone learned at home. I didn't realize it was a special talent. And nor did I even think about like, hey, you should go to school for something like that. That didn't even cross my mind. So when I went to school, I was like, hey, I really like to have fun. So let me go study having fun. And, you know, and that's what I did. And I'll only do this as a side gig to get me to do the thing I really wanted to do. Well, then I went into the career and I was like, I'm not going to make any money, you know, kayaking in the woods. So I have to go do an actual job. And that it kind of fell into place. I liked computer programming, I liked math, I liked solving big complex problems. And my bosses were like, hey, you're unique. And they actually kept pushing me to places. So I went to work at the State Council for Higher Education. And I worked for one of your old bosses then. Kathy, Peter says we have got to our spot in very different ways, but it's not really that way. I worked at Chev. Kathy worked at Chev. And that's where I learned how to be like a research analyst, a data analyst, using those skills to actually solve problems for higher education. Graduation rates, enrollment projections, things like that. And then CAP 1 actually called me. Kathy's team called me and said, hey, we're looking for data people. We hear you're really good. And I got hired and, worked my way up the ranks as a data analyst at Capital One. Actually, at Cap One, got rotated through lots and lots and lots of roles. Every 18 months was, hey, Karen, go do this, or Karen, go solve this problem, or Karen, go try to be an operations leader. Karen, go be a tech lead. Karen, go be a program manager. Karen, go do this. And I just got thrown at really complex problems. And she was really good at solving them. Yeah, I'm really action oriented. I like finishing things. And eventually, ran an innovation, big data transformation program at Capital One. And at the end of that, I was kind of like, well, what am I going to do next? And they said, hey, you have lots of 6 or 7 different things. And I was like, well, let me look outside because there was a lot of people calling. And I realized that I could actually solve big, complex things in a different industry or a different company, and I should go try that. My first job after Capital One, which is where I learned pretty much everything I ever learned about data, I've taken 2 other companies from Capital One. My first was Liberty Mutual, and I was the chief data officer there. And I spent almost 2 years there, and this was when I realized, hey, culture of the company really matters, and that just because you're really good at solving complex problems doesn't mean that they're ready for you to solve the complex problems, even if they say they are. So I then went to Citibank, called me and said, hey, we have a role. It's down in Mexico. We'd like for you to be the chief data officer for our Mexico region. And their Mexico branch has every single imaginable financial service product you imagine, retirement accounts, commercial banking, credit cards. It's actually larger than Capital One itself. So I was like, I didn't know that either when I got there. I didn't know any Spanish. I didn't know. That was going to be my question. Did you know Spanish? No, I didn't know any Spanish. But I was like, hey, I think this is going to be an important learning experience for me. And so it's another example of how I was just like, let me just dive in and try. And I learned a ton about the Latino culture, a lot about Mexico, about different products, about Citi. Had a great experience. And then unfortunately for me, COVID hit, and I ended up in Richmond again. I never left Richmond, but I was based in Mexico. And
you had a house there too, then, right?
Yeah, I had a place there. Yeah, and then I would go back and forth all the time. Every 2 weeks, I was flying back and forth. It was actually really difficult. So actually, when COVID hit, I was actually like, wow, this is great. I can stay in one place for a period of time. Everyone else was really upset, and I was like,
I'm home.
I'm home. Yeah, I can understand what people were saying. So at that point, Citi asked me to be the chief data officer for a consumer bank because we had a big regulatory issues, which most people know. We have a consent order all around data management practices. And through that is actually, I was able to land that because of connections. So Jane Fraser, who is our CEO, she was the CEO of Latin America at that point. So I knew her really well down in Mexico. And so she, made a few phone calls and said, hey, we really need you. So at this point, I now have a global remit. So it's, Asia, Europe, Latin America, and North America. And so my team's all over the place. I have a fantastic team, all great data professionals. I have a big team, like thousands. We have, so on my direct team, it's north of 500, but when I consider my team, I also consider all the people that actually are working on the initiatives with us. And so there's about 4,000 people working on stuff in the data space, and it's growing by the week. So that's how I ended up on it. So some of it is being right place, right time. Some of it is, not being afraid of taking on big challenges, experiencing new things. Some of it is, having a good father who taught you how to code, So anyways, yeah.
Okay, I have to do my disclosure, which is the thoughts and opinions shared here today are mine and not those of Freddie Mac. I love my company, but I have to do my disclosure, so please take that. I will not talk about, other than when I do my intro, I will not talk about any specific companies. Let's see. I actually went to school to study computer science. I started at VCU. I wasn't a very good student. I was actually working. So you're going to hear a lot of very similar things. I was working for the newspaper here, and I loved my job. In 3.5 years, I had finished 11 classes. Wasn't really on my way to finish college. And I was studying math. I like Karen, and am a big math person, and went down the computer science path and had to take a class on math structures and logic. And I can prove that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. And I had a complete mental disconnect from the world over that. I was like, no. We have been doing this our whole lives. This is 2 things. and started researching other programs. Well, VCU at the time, by the way, I did this in my VCU commencement speech. I did it for the business school a couple of years ago. Didn't have information systems. And I actually found one at JMU. And I realized that I was going to be making very little money for the rest of my life, like Karen. And I packed my bags and I moved on campus and finished 100 credit hours in 2 years. So I'm like Karen, once again, very results oriented. And my first job out of school, I made the mistake, and I share. I see one of my VCU friends in the back. I share frequently, understand who you're going to go work for. So my first job out of school was for consulting. I had interviewed with people in Dallas. I was working with people in Baltimore. It was like two completely different companies. I lasted 3.5 months. And so I came back to Richmond. I was working out of Washington, and I couldn't find a job. My other valuable opinion is, please don't quit your job till you have another one. No, I didn't have any experience, so nobody wanted to hire me. And then I ran across Chev, and Chev had an opening for a pretty much entry-level person. And my job was very different than yours. This was when desktops actually first came out. So for those who aren't familiar with Chev, it is typically staffed by about 50 PhDs that have worked in academia, brilliant people who actually didn't know how to turn on a desktop. So my job was to actually install desktops and teach class, neither of which was I really trained to do, but I learned. And people said to me, you make things so simple. And I'm like, I want to share that with you all because I think that's a really important piece that you need to understand, which is we as data professionals tend to talk about things in elevated words. Data management is an elevated word. You scare people when you say data management. But if you say, I just turn it around. I just say, we want to manage our data. And this is my simple definition of data management, which is data are easy to find. They're ready to use. They're secure, yet easily accessible to those who should have access to the data. And so by using that, I actually get people to start to listen. So I learned early on, break things down where people can understand you. After a year, all that was done, and they were like, we'll promote you. And I'm like, no, I need to go do something else. This is a great entry-level job. Good thing I left, or you may not have worked there, and God only knows where you would be. Karen's a few years behind me, so I left that job open for her. And I took a tour to the Federal Reserve, and my job was to take them from doing paper-based budgeting. Very few people in this room are old enough, but it was green bar paper, and months, January through December across the top, and cost center items down the side, and a pencil and eraser. That's what you got to do your budget. And we went to a spreadsheet-based, I won't call it program, but that's probably the closest I can come up with. And after I finished that, I went and had the opportunity to go work at a bank called Bank of Virginia, who had the exact same problem. And I was like, oh, well, this is fun. Well, while I was there, I worked for the chief economist at, it was now Signet Bank, because we had merged with a bank in Maryland. And he was a lackluster kind of guy. I've told him this story. But like he walks in the room and his face is red and he's all excited. He goes, these guys, Rich Fairbank and Nigel Morris, have just come along and they're going to democratize credit in our credit card business. Everyone in 1988 had a $18 annual membership fee on their credit card and a 19.8% APR. There was no differentiation. Everybody who was sitting in the audience, and probably you had actually a really low credit limit too, and they believed if you use data, you could understand the unique needs of all the people and get them the right product, right price, right time. And I was like, I don't know who these guys are, but if they can get our chief economist excited about what they're doing, I want to work there. And so this was our credit card division. So once again, I can't emphasize enough, relationships matter. Even when you're trying to get your data stuff done, if you don't have the relationships with people, build them. because you can leverage them to actually go out and move your agenda on data. And so Ken Reckenbill, who near and dear to me, was actually the first person hired to work on the credit card for data. And he had worked with me on something downtown. And so I called him and said, hey, can we talk? Well, that talk turned into, hey, Kathy, I want you to see what you'll be doing. There's 35 mag tapes in this cube, each with a different layout on them. I need you to come up with one layout for all of these mag tapes. They were from magazine subscriptions where we had name and address. Well, you wouldn't think there's a variety in name and address. How people store name and address, full name. Some of them have Mr. and Mrs. in it. Some of them have suffixes in it. Some of them break them out. It took about 4 hours for me to go through all of those and come up with one layout. But that's really like the turning point in my career where I realized like data was a thing. Capital One obviously successfully IPO'd in '94 from Signet Bank. And I did data. I built all their marketing analytics. So I was the girl pumping mail into your mailboxes and did all the analytics. And here's the reason why I like to talk about this, because I had the job of being not only the consumer of my data, but I was also the producer. I was the girl bringing the data in. I had to make sure that it was fit for me to do mailings and fit for analytics. So I realized for many, like producer consumer is a very old model, but it actually still works to this day. I can talk to people about producer consumer. I held a variety of other jobs at Capital One, loved every minute of my career there, and left at the end of '07 because I thought I could go out and do it again. And to Karen's comment, cultures of companies do matter as to whether or not you can accomplish your agenda. Please make sure you understand the companies that you work for. I will say that the reason, and I actually, in one of my interviews, I had a conversation about why CDOs don't stay around very long. And this person said to me, and it was fun because we kind of had this jovial thing in the interview, but he said, well, it's because they want to go make more money. I said, no, I disagree. It has nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
I said it has to do with the fact that they come in with an agenda and try to shove that on the organization. And in my interviews, what I tell people is, I know how to do this, but I don't know how to do it here. And I think it's really important to understand the culture of your company. How does work get done? Have you seen other people accomplish things that have never been done before? How did they do it? Like, what tactic did they use? And so I think that that's a biggie. I don't know if you.
Yeah, no, it is. And when you get to a size of city, there's many cultures. And so figuring out like, hey, my wealth side of my executives over there are very, very, very different than my credit card executives. And so you have to adapt. You have to learn. You have to listen. You have to try, sometimes fail, try again. So that grit and determination to be like, okay, I'll get it right eventually. So,
Well, and
yeah.
I'd like to also say it's a wash, rinse, repeat cycle.
It is.
I have had so many people that have worked with me and for me say, we've already told them that. You know what? They have big jobs. Data, they haven't figured out how to integrate that into the way they think. And I really do think our job as data leaders is to help people envelope managing data into the way they do their jobs. If you inflict it on them and say, you have to put this stuff in the data catalog, and it becomes an add-on step for you, and you're going to stop doing it the minute I turn my back because you're like, I don't see the value. Find out who cares about that stuff being in the catalog. Go find those consumers, connect them back to the person who is producing it, help them see that value. It's intuitive to each and every one of you in this room, that value. It's not intuitive to everybody else. And I think
I think the point you made around how you communicate it is the key to success. Like, literally, you got to dumb it down. Like, you cannot use words. Like in my day, hour to hour, I use lots of techie, data, analytically words, but you can't communicate that up to the senior leaders in the business. They have big jobs. They don't talk like us. They don't want to talk like us, and they don't understand us. So how do you really convert what we're saying into what they would understand is a large part of the job. I spent a lot of time with my team going over like, well, what are you trying to say? Can we make it easier to understand? What's the main points? Are they going to understand what you're trying to convey? So it's a large part of the job. Like the communication of the great work the team is doing is super, super important.
I mean, watch people when you talk about things or your team is talking about things. I actually, one of the people that worked for me, and I will always smile when I tell the story about her, but when she spoke, I could watch the person, this executive she was speaking to, literally their eyes glaze over. You could just see it. And you could see the sort of attention, drifting away from the conversation. And what I realized is the executive didn't understand what she was talking about. And it was in elevated terms, don't get me wrong. And I said, look, you need to bring this down to a 7th grade level. And I'm not saying the people that I work with are stupid, but they are learning. They are not data literate yet. You have to help them get there. And it was really funny because she had a 7th grader at home and she would spin her decks, her PowerPoints, by her 7th grader before she went to meet with this executive. And literally night and day, everything that she needed to get done, got done.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, and so I will forever treasure.
Hire the 7th grader.
Yeah. So, I mean, just remember that, which is just so easy to get caught up in the languages that we use. And you can use this with your team.
Yeah.
It's just once you go out the door, you need to be listening, learning what your business partners are doing. What matters to them? Do they care about efficiency? Yeah. Use that. Yeah. Do they care about saving money or making money? Find what those drivers are.
Yeah. There's a lot of time I spend after meetings talking one-on-one. I'm like, did you understand that? No. Okay, let me explain. And like, oh, I get it now, Karen. Okay. And so then I incorporate that conversation back into the team to say, okay, we need to explain it slightly differently. We need to use this. He understood this language or she understood that language. Yep. So it's a evolving.
It's a skill.
It is a skill. It is a skill.
Did we beat that horse to death, Peter? Yeah. Sorry, Karen and I are just.
We'll keep going.
That's perfectly good. I think one of the things that both of them had as a theme, is that a little better?
Yeah, turn on.
As a theme was, we know how to do this, we don't know how to do it here. And that requires you to work closely with your team. And so this is sort of next topic, and I just had a couple of slides to cue it up, which is that most organizations don't realize that a data problem at the very center of their systems causes all sorts of things that go out around the organization. And so every data problem has been filtered through some sort of an IT system or business process. So they're out there playing whack-a-mole trying to get these things here. And the real part is that,
hey, Peter, before you leave here, it's really interesting. Even getting the mind share of your technology professionals that you work with. I've actually had people tell me, well, I mean, data exists because we have applications. And I'm like, no. Applications exist to collect and produce data. So but I have not, it is not one time that I have heard it.
Okay, I would take either one of those because I've had application managers telling me, I don't have to worry about the data, I just own the application. I'm like, what? So it could be worse, Kathy. It could be much, much worse.
So you may take that for granted, right? That they understand. If they've never been in a data job, they don't understand. As Peter said, we don't teach this in college. We teach how to build programs. We don't teach that data is a thing. And by the way, by understanding, for example, I was just talking, sorry, Craig Snodgrass is looking right at me. I was just talking to him and we were up here on the front. It's fun to see friends and make new friends. And we were talking about developing screens for people to do. And it's one of those things of how do you make capturing data, good data, intuitive, right? Don't give me a name field. If you give me a name field, I'm gonna put a variety, I can give you 50 ways that I could actually put my name into that field. I may put C. Doss, I may put Catherine Doss, I may put Kathy Doss, I may put Catherine Clay Doss, I can pick a bunch. And so it's like, we need those folks who are upfront gathering requirements to understand that whoever's going to have their fingers on the keyboard doesn't necessarily know what you're trying to capture. So we've got to relay that and make sure they understand. And your guys who have fingers on the keyboard creating your Python code or whatever, they also are the last stopgap for making sure something doesn't get implemented that gives you bad data. And so the education isn't just with the executives, it's also with the people who are building things for you that produce data. Sorry, Peter, you started on this.
Yeah. All I was going to do is say, we've got a big communication problem.
Are you hot?
The question for you guys is, how do you build teams? What have been the things that have worked for you? Because you've had to do it in each new position that you've gone into.
I look for people with the results orientation, the intellectual curiosity, analytical skills, not necessarily quantitative skills. The fact that you can solve a calculus problem is interesting, but I want people who can pull things apart and figure out how they tick and how they work. And
Yeah, I agree with all that. Curiosity, solving complex problems, results orientated. I think also we try to say, are they going to fit in with the existing team? And do they complement other people? Because we spend a lot of time saying, if we pair these three people together, what's going to happen? And in order to form high-performing teams, you have to spend a lot of time thinking about each individual and how they would contribute to the team success. The other thing we do is we're pretty thoughtful about, the team culture, the principles, and as people are coming on board saying, and when we're recruiting, like, hey, here's how we operate as a team. We expect you to operate as a team this way also. And we spend a lot of time on that, which is important. So they feel at home when they come to, and they know what they're going to expect. The other thing I'll say is that city's really, really big. Specificity of boundaries around roles is actually more difficult than you can imagine. Like, who owns what data? The number of hours we spend on that, specifying it. Even now, I'm like, okay, we don't have it just right yet, so we don't have it specific enough yet. And so we spend a lot of time on, okay, roles, responsibilities, but who is going to be taking that data owner role? Who is going to be the data steward? Who is the data engineering person that they are going to be partnering with for their data? And the other concept we have is around kind of first team, second team. The city is pretty hierarchical. It's like many banks, it's hierarchical. Like, hey, I report to my manager, person manager, person manager. But how you work and get things done, it's not necessarily based on the hierarchy that you're in. And so teaching people how to work across borders, like your team is your agile squad that isn't your hierarchical team. It's the team that you're going to be partnering with the data owner, the data steward, the engineer, the data consumer to go solve a business problem. That like, can people operate like that? Is something that we actually spend a lot of time on when we're talking to them up front. Because that's how you get things done in the company. It's not there's no job on my team that you can get done by yourself. There just isn't. You have to partner with these other parts of the data organization. So developing this big system of teams you spend a lot of time. That's part of the job as a leader. It's not just knowing how data works, but how teams work.
Yeah, I would say networking, marketing, the ability to pitch what we do. I'm staring at Chris Copeland because I delivered this message to his organization, is being able to sell why this is important. And I don't mean you have to be like a salesperson, but you have to be able to connect, having those relationship building skills. It's not something, I can't do data from my office. I spend more time talking about data in the hallway, in the cafeteria, just any time that I can get my agenda up on somebody's radar and try to learn what's important to them. I don't pitch my agenda, but it's like, hey, Karen, you know, like, what are you working on these days? I can always, by the way, I have what I like to refer to as data ears. So when people talk, I hear data. It doesn't matter what we're talking about, I've got data going on. And I want to find people who can listen for and find and talk to. And I just said the word, but I want to hit it. Having really good listening skills is so important to what we do, because you're not pushing something, you're trying to pull things out of them and help them solve their problems. So
it's a great quote over on the wall there. Others talk, we listen, right?
yes.
And that's absolutely key to making this up. I'm doing lots of questions up here. If you guys have questions, just raise your hands, because again, we want to make this as interactive as we possibly. Okay, there we go. Absolutely.
Let's see if the mic works for them, Peter.
Is it? Okay.
It does work. It does work.
It does.
Peter just needs to hold it really close.
This is good timing, so I didn't want to get too far from it, but you both mentioned a lot about culture and the importance of culture and how maybe it didn't fit. And I was kind of curious on your thoughts on influencing culture, how to work with maybe a diverging culture, or as in maybe the culture is shifting. And then I guess in general, like maybe, is that an influence up? Is that a top down, or just thoughts around culture?
All of the above. Yeah, all of the above. I think it actually depends on the organization that you're in and where you sit in the organization. If you're in an organization like City, it's huge, right? And so you have a company culture that you have to fit into. You can have some uniqueness, but it has to be within the guardrails of the bigger organization. So you definitely influence up. Like I talk to my leadership team around, hey, we see an opportunity here where we as a team can get better. We're getting a lot of feedback through our employee feedback surveys. Like, how are we going to address it? What else do we need to do? That's opportunities to influence up, to change the team culture or change the city culture. I sit on many committees on change making around in culture for city, and try to contribute my best I can there. And then downward, like how am I rolling out city culture, and how are we ensuring that we as a team are really pushing toward that? So there's not one avenue. You take as many avenues as you can to change it. Changing culture and people is by far the hardest job. I would say the data part and actually solving the complex data problems is actually the easiest part of my job. It is the easiest part. So it's the funnest part too, but it's the easiest. Yeah. I don't know if I can add to that. Yes, yeah, no, I thought that was well done.
There's another question.
To help.
Yeah, I was thinking, trying to build on that. I was kind of formulating an assumption to what you said earlier about when I think both of you moved maybe to different organizations and it turned out not to be a great fit from a culture standpoint. And my assumption out of that, connecting to the billing data teams and teams in general, was, is that where it went off the rails potentially? Where, hey, you were brought in to, do all these great things, but when it came down to, I need, in order to do these great things, I need to bring in these types of people. I need to change the organization, go through OCM. Is that where things kind of maybe, because I'm trying to relate it to, a similar situation I am in and trying to glean some lessons learned, if that makes sense.
Okay. Okay, so the question is, hey, if when we were in the position where, hey, culture wasn't a great fit, did it go off the rails because the team culture changes, transformation that need to happen? Is that one of the root causes?
I mean, you're not getting the support from leadership that you
do
what you
I think
do.
there's many reasons why things can go off the rails, right? One could be, yes, senior leaders around you are not supportive of the agenda, or the agenda that you thought they would need isn't matching the agenda they need. So there's a matching of goals and vision that needs to happen. And if you don't do that, it can definitely cause things to go off the rails. Changing people and skill set and transforming an organization is really hard work. And sometimes the company isn't ready to do that transformational work because it needs a lot of hard decisions when it may impact people. And so you have to get that buy-in also. Without that buy-in, it's really hard to reskill people because it takes money and effort and all that. So that can cause you to, I'll say, get off the rails in terms of ultimately gaining the ultimate goal of having high quality data. If you don't have data people on your team, I was literally given at times a bunch of project managers and said, hey, here's your data team. And I was like, this isn't a data team, this is a project management team. And we need project managers, and there's a lot of great project managers, but I also need data skilled people to do this job. And so a lot of hard conversations around getting that buy-in to uplift the organization talent. And so that can derail also, because that requires then change, and change is hard.
Yeah, I'll throw in, if you have the opportunity, there are people who this is their job. They are change management experts. I like to go into organizations and either recruit one or find them. So people who can help me think about it. When I was at Capital One, I had a large change management team, and these people are experts. Some of them own businesses here in Richmond now doing just that from a change management. But these people understand how to move people who are here to there. So whether you're hiring somebody or bringing in an expert from the outside, having somebody who has those behavioral skills, it's not my forte. But I know people who it is their forte, and they are really good at understanding the hurdle. And then it's trying to find out what's going to move these people. Based on the variety of organizations I've been in, is it decreasing risk? There's a lot going on right now with Gen AI, right? Like sometimes being able to talk to them and something that they're interested in, Gen AI. Okay, well, we need to make sure that we don't end up, this is my story always, don't end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And so what are things that they need to think about? It's a good time to insert something about data and how managing it can help. Or are they cost driven? They want to decrease cost, or do we want to increase revenue? Find out what their agendas are. I see that the next one coming is data strategy. And it's so interesting because it is like the hottest topic you can, everywhere. Everybody wants to do a data strategy. And I'm like, the first thing I want to know is what's the business strategy? Because data supports the business. We are not a destination. We are an enabler to the destination. If you don't know what your company's business strategy is, like I've worked for companies where we had imperatives every year. When you know what those imperatives are, it's really easy to figure out how you can move your data story into it and what do they need, which becomes your data strategy. So anyway, just please take to heart very much, this is a change management thing. And if it's not your forte, try to find someone who can actually, even if it's a friend, it could be a neighbor, somebody who knows how to do this to kind of help you think through how you can understand where people are. And I think it's fascinating that you have just such the diversity across city, because I can't imagine how many cultures that and you have to adapt. These teams have to adapt to all of those. So once again, hear me loud and clear. Data is a change management opportunity.
It is. I can't stress enough, like having someone that you can turn to and say, hey, I have a change that we need to do. What are the steps and what's the plan we're going to take through to make this happen? It's so important. It really, really, really is. And it's not something that I think a lot of people realize it's a skill set in itself, but it is. It's a really important one, especially if you're going to go through a transformation. If you're going to go through a transformation, get people on board that know how to drive change.
I
I think you guys have started to answer this a little bit, but knowing both of you and having worked and seen you hands on keyboards and go, I can't do that. Never could, never wanted to, but there's an amount of art to the work that you have done in your past and that you do today. And there's a balance of art and science. How do you create that creativity to get to the art part?
That's yours. She's the creative one. Karen talked about the different skills that we bring. I think I pride myself in being able to understand what motivates Karen versus what motivates Chris, and trying to help them see things that will entice that creativity on their part. I love solving problems. I do miss that. I really do miss going, oh, I've got the answer. I know what it is. I actually have, in addition to data management professionals, I also have the data tech in my current role. And it's interesting because I find myself constantly trying to figure out, I can't turn my data tech people into me, but I can help them grow an appreciation for what I do, which becomes a puzzle for them to solve. So I'm constantly trying to get to know, like I meet with everybody on my team. I have like 6-person lunches, and it's hard. When you're in the hundreds of people, it's hard. But I'll do like 6-person lunches, some of them virtual, some of them others. But the whole point of it is not to talk about work. It's tell me about you. Tell me about your, things you like to do. What do you do in your spare time? Because as I learn people, I always find a way to, and I do this with beyond even my team, but it's just trying to understand what excites people so that they can have that creativity. And I don't say no to people. If Karen has a better idea than me, I let her soar. I might let her fail too. But it's one where she's not going to learn if I tell her don't do it. She's very passionate about it, and I'm going to try to help her succeed. But I think that art part is really starting to really knowing the people that you work with and trying to point them at that light of their creativity.
Yep. I think it hit so many good themes there. One, at some point I had to learn that I wasn't the brightest person in the room, and I didn't always have the right answer. Or the best answer. That was a hard time for me. My dad didn't teach me programming when I was a child. And so sometimes I literally am having to bite my tongue, but I'm like, no, back off, let them discover this, let the team discover. And sometimes I do a good job at it. Sometimes I'm still catching myself I like to problem solve, and so I like to dive into the answer. Yes, I do. But I'm like, hey, that's actually not the most creative way for them to engage too. They want to do the problem solving now. And so how do I create the forms now for them to express that themselves? And so, I have sessions where you have, working sessions with Karen, where they're bringing in problems that they're trying to solve. And we have just generally problem solving time where they can bring problems in, they can say, here's what I think we do. I'd say, oh, that sounds like a great idea. Or sometimes like, oh, think about this also doing that. And then they go off and, do their job. And so I think it is where you are, you have to be thoughtful about how do you empower other people to be creative and problem solve it too. And that was, a lesson for me to learn. It didn't come naturally, let's put it that way.
I think for most data people are problem solvers,
Yeah.
and I think we're quick to respond with the answer, which means they don't learn.
Yeah.
They don't. And so I think it's giving them that space to learn and maybe coach from the edges.
Yeah. Or time to fail, you say. I have set teams off oh, that's not going to work. But okay, let's see how.
And sometimes they surprise you though.
Yeah. Sometimes they do. I'm like, wow, that was way better than I thought it was going to turn out. And so part of it's it's a learning. It's a learning experience. Everything they're doing is a learning experience.
Okay, take another note. I'm up here, by the way, taking notes of things Karen says, working sessions with Karen. I actually like that. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, it's fun. Those are some of that's fun meetings too for me, because I get to hear about all the gory details of the problems they're trying to solve, and that's the fun part of the job.
So I have one note back here. I want to go back to something Karen mentioned earlier about data ownership. And so one of the things I always like to share is when you do data, I see so many people who go into an organization and who look at the data swamp behind them. Like, oh, we have to fix the swamp. No. You have to fix what created the data swamp. Because if you don't go from this day forward, the swamp just gets bigger every day.
Yeah.
And so, like for us, you mentioned data ownership. Everything new that we build has a data owner. There's an application owner and there is a data owner, and that is in our dialogue of the organization. By the way, don't try to solve everything in the data space, but if you can, like, to me, data ownership is like a pivotal thing that if I had to say, if you can get one thing done, find out who your data owners are and will be in the future and get them in a place where everybody knows.
Yeah, we do that. Like actually, because we have so much data, we actually we've done it a couple different ways, but like on the consumer side, we've actually created a role because it's a full-time job being a data owner for our credit card data, or lending data, or deposits data. And so we have now people that have explicit roles, responsibilities around it. And it's amazing.
A full-time job.
It's a full-time job.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it's amazing when you have full-time people really paying attention to the countless number of projects coming in around that would impact the data, and they're inserting the conversation. Suddenly, the conversation elevated to, hey, do you have the right controls on that data? No. And here are the controls we should be inserting in that data stream. Things get better, and you can track how it's gotten better. We materially had set up metrics, and now we can see, hey, a year later, our metrics are so much better, and this team of people have driven that. It's worked. It's working, I should say. We're not out of the woods yet, but it's working.
So as you see me, literally I am taking notes. Karen's mentioned a couple of things I want to keep track of.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for, I don't know, Peter, 30 some years, I guess. I'm still learning, guys. That's why these forums are so important. We'll never be done. And with the technology generation that's going on around us with Gen AI and everything else, I'll be learning.
I know.
As long as I'm doing
The
it.
whole Gen AI, it kind of scares me a little bit. I'm like, okay, it's another whole sphere. Yeah, it really is a S-curve that you need to get through and figure out on the other side what it's going to be. But we're in that curve right now with it.
So, I mean, as a data professional, you're going to be a lifelong learner. And the people that work for you, and by the way, that's another thing to look for with people, is are they interested in continuing to learn? Because you're never done. You will never be done in this space. I'll find 5 minutes to go read 3 articles that came across my desk because it's like, oh, I learned something. And it's something I need to think about in my role to make sure that our data is protected and leveraged correctly and compliant and ethically. Sorry, that's a hard one, right? It's a really hard one. So anyway, Peter, I see bunches of hands going up.
I have a question about kind of bridging company culture and personnel management. So I, like many people in this room, work with a number of high performers, and they all come to the table with, concepts of data best practices. And, we can look at a process and say, why are we doing it like this when this is the right way to do it? And as you move up in a company, you start to see more about these decisions and how they have to be made for the good of the whole group and not just your division or your department or what you think is best practice, right? So how do you manage that high performer with the right opinion and they have the right motivation and goal, but it doesn't quite adhere to company goals and standards, and how do you also kind of determine how transparent you are about that versus maybe shielding a little bit so that you don't end up having a frustrated high performer?
Okay, you giggled. I'm going to go first.
I feel like this is my day-to-day job. yeah, people are opinionated, right? Especially high performers. They are smart, driven, opinionated people that want to do really, really good work. And sometimes their bar is actually higher than it really needs to be, it's good enough. And good enough is good enough, and you can go off and go solve some other problem. But maybe they have a little bit of perfectionist in them. And sometimes people don't realize, where they sit in the bigger scheme of the company. And with data being super horizontal, I mean, it starts here but ends up across the whole company, used by just about anybody. It's even more important to have a single way of doing it in order to attach and integrate it together. And sometimes data people don't want to do that. Like, they're really unique. So I hear your frustration, and it's really difficult. A lot of coaching, a lot of them sitting down with them individually and saying, if we did what you said, what are the implications? And get them to think through what the implications are themselves. Don't tell them the answer. Make them think it through. And then come back to you and say, I got it. Make them have the aha moment. So just ask them a bunch of questions of what would happen if, what would happen if, what would happen if. When you do that, they're smart people. They'll eventually get on the train. But you also have to say, like, hey, that's a really bright idea. Let's figure out how to incorporate that in the next iteration. Because it's an evolving story, and you're never quite done. It doesn't mean that that idea is bad. It means, like, maybe right now it's not what we need. Because that's another, like, you got to give them hope. Everyone needs hope.
Well, and I think it's just adding into that. It's are there some predecessor steps to that, and pointing them back to, that is a great idea. So give them that hope. Mm-hmm. But do you think there's other things we may need to do before we get there? Because I often find myself, I can see where we need to be. I can just touch it. And
I was having
everybody else,
with my boss yesterday, like, I told you exactly what we needed to do, and you decided not to do it. And here we are. Like, literally yesterday we were having that conversation.
And so it's one of those, I have to myself, still to this day, catch my breath and kind of go, yes, I remember. I know where that is, but I need to back up because there's 12 things that I need to do between here and there. And so I think if you can give them that, push them back up a little bit, and are there the predecessor steps to it? I think sometimes can help. And once again, as Karen said, don't give them the answer, because if you give them the answer, it just frustrates them. But just sort of say, but is there anything we need to do beforehand? Are there any components missing? Yes. And by the way, make sure when we get there that you give them all the accolades. That is a big thing as well that I find, which is sometimes the data journey takes so long that you forget to call those people out and say, we're here because of Karen. And she did these things along the way. I have a Post-it note on my computer. Somebody said this to me a couple of years ago, and they said, data has a long return cycle. Don't forget that, because it takes a really long time for all of your hard work to come together. And if your team feels like they're putting in a lot, and by the way, I will say, so we had an MOU at Capital One in 2000, and it was a memorandum of understanding, I apologize. And it was from the regulators. And I mean, we were heads down, the whole company. We all went heads down to resolve. Data was a piece of it. There were a lot of things that were a piece of that memorandum of understanding. We just needed to grow up. We were still running like cowboys. That was awesome. Regulators don't like cowboys. And so, but it was interesting because I had to build for Capital One the data policy and all of that. And by the way, you can't lean on a policy. I'll hit that in a second. But it was interesting because at the end of it, my coach said to me, and I'll always do this, Andy Cohen of all people, but he pulled me aside and he said, you can celebrate once along the way. I was like so focused on my end goal, which is to make the data part of the MOU go away. And not once did I celebrate when we had big hurdles that we climbed over. And so don't don't let them get lost in that last celebration. Help them when they figure out the milestones in between, celebrate the milestones. And it's a time to talk about how those are gonna, continue to build. And that becomes your job of, how do I continue to share this story with management that this is a journey? There's no destination, unfortunately. I wish there was. Maybe I'll write a book on what's the destination, because I don't know if I know what it is right now. That'll be a book. Okay, you should do that. Yeah, you should do it with me. Okay, all right. Peter will help. Yeah, Peter will help.
I wanted to step back to maybe just a couple minutes ago, where I think if I was listening in, you were talking about an AI and generative AI, and that's another interesting sigmoid or S-curve. I'm feeling very different about this. This doesn't, and maybe it's because I plan on aging out of the workforce. Before that.
Yeah, exactly. Do I get out before this?
Yeah. But just thinking in terms of the acceleration of how all things artificial intelligence, including generative, including using co-pilots for coding, co-pilots for customer service, this time it really feels different. And so I wanted to sort of hear what you would have to say about this question, which is, if it's really different, how do we need to be thinking about it differently as data leaders? Should we be looking for talent in a different way? Are the ways that we attracted junior talent versus rewarded mid-career people fundamentally changing? Because this new technology is so different. It's not just another S-curve that will feel the way the last ones have. I think this one's very different. So if I challenge you and say, it's really different, and put you in that question, how do you feel about that? Is it the same, or is there something going on with generative AI that's fundamentally different?
I think it's different because it's sticking now, where before there's a lot of buzzwords, like academic, a lot of kind of, I'll say, cool bells and whistles, but it wasn't really practical. I think it's sticking now because there's some real practical applications to how we conduct our business. And that's great. It's making things more efficient. It's making routine things, obsolete, and hopefully empowers people to do the more complex things, because it's not there yet. It's also a little scary because you look at what it can do, and it's built on content. The content is data, and if you know how dirty the data is, then it's just going to be spitting out bad results, bad AI. I don't know. And so it's scary to me, like, because as I know all of the warts that data can produce, and this just will explode it. It will amplify it, and so that's the S curve of how we in the data management. What do we need to do to evolve, adapt, make it go faster, always on? Because right now we think very much in batch fill with data management practices. There is a lot of streaming, and we do put controls in, but it's not ingrained at this point. It's always like, hey, I'll run my quality rules, after the fact. When you have AI and real-time AI spitting out answers to clients in real time, guess what? That's not going to be good enough. And more and more that happens, the more and more impact it's going to have, and more and more content it produces. So bad content produces bad content that produces bad content, and it's going to spiral. So I worry about it. I don't have a good answer. I don't know if it's a talent thing, or we need really smart people to think differently about how we solve the problems. That's a lot of the talent we have been talking about anyways. We need people that understand the technology. We need people to understand, how we use AI ourselves to possibly point out in real time where we should be focusing versus things that don't matter. So I don't know. That's where I am right now.
I think the fundamentals, though, are still the same.
Yeah.
And actually, the Gen AI is a great platform for y'all to launch off of, right? Karen's comment about, bad data, bad results. It's a good time to use that. Hey, why don't we focus on the quality of the data that we have so that we can leverage it to actually get those human efficiencies, to get results faster, to find insights faster. I worry about a world where people don't know they're running AI on bad data and what's going to come out of that. So I'm going to continue to lean on the data professionals to make sure, but I do think for everybody in this room, if you haven't gone out and played with the prompts, please do, because you will start to see that. I actually did a test of, I took a bunch of feedback, obviously de-identified feedback, to try to get it to help me write summary statements for appraisal. Somebody gave me the idea. I just wanted to see if it was any good.
You wrote your.
I didn't
Oh my
do
God,
it. I
that's
never knew.
amazing.
I just tested it because I had already written my summary, but I wanted to see based on the feedback what it would come up with. And it was tilted. It was completely tilted in the wrong direction. And so it's like, it's not there yet. And so I just wanted to see, people are saying, oh, you can use it to write memos. Yes, it does a really good job for that. But once again, everything with Gen AI right now, the way I think about it, it's 100% human eyes on. And I do worry about a world where people trust, but don't verify. And that actually is a risk for any of your organizations. And so there's one thing that you can do is make sure for now, it's 100% eyes on. This stuff can be used to take a program and make it more efficient. This can be used to write programs for you. I need something that does this. By the way, what data are they using, guys? Is it restricted data that they shouldn't be putting into any sort of AI technology? So once again, the more you all, each and every one of you, and can encourage your teams. I actually partner with one of the consultants on my team and did a session with me and our CISO, our Chief Information Security Officer, just to get us literate on how to write prompts. I can't do it on my work computer. I do it on my personal computer. But if you haven't done that, please do. But please encourage your folks to get involved, because I don't know what the perfect answer is to, how to prepare for this. But I think all of us being knowledgeable is so important, and we'll evolve together. And by the way, once again, I'm going to put out, DAMA RVA, we need each other right now. And so the more that we can share and continue to bring that together, I think is really important. He's got the mic, he's looking at me.
One question to Mike Lee here, and then I actually do want to come back and focus on succession, then we'll take a break on this. But Mike, good to see you.
Good morning. I was hoping you could expand on the concept of data ownership, particularly as data is getting shared between applications, between departments, all over the place. How do you go about identifying owners? Is it by system, department, domain, and what are their responsibilities and how do they interact with your teams?
Yep, I'll take that, right? Yeah. Okay, I'll send you. Yeah, thanks. So we did create a data owner role with a specific sets of responsibilities. One, they are accountable for the data quality. They're accountable to the consumers of the data to meet whatever consumer needs of the data are. They are responsible for the controls, responsible for the budget, investment around it, and it's and all the other stuff that goes with it. We did have to create hey, how do we know how to designate what you're data owner of? And so for our business, we took a product view primarily because that's how we talk and that's how we think and that's how our business is aligned. And we also wanted to do it not organizationally aligned because those change a lot. And so I wanted to create some stability with the ownership. So when our orgs change, the ownership of the data doesn't change per se. You might get a new person in there, but the actual construct of the ownership remains stable. We also have our application environment is very complex, and we have several applications that are around the same products. And so we wanted to string the information together to create an integrated view. And most of our data, when you look at our consumers, are really looking at it from I use the product data primarily in itself. And occasionally we have use cases where we'll cross products. And so 80-20 rule, most people are using it within the product. Let's go ahead and create that. So that way there's a single person that everyone recognizes as, hey, Todd owns credit card data, Angela owns mortgages, that's super simple to understand. Who doesn't understand that, right? And then we had a couple of, I'll say data domains, data concepts that go horizontal, customer. But everyone understands what customer is also. So we used the business terms to explain it. And then we tied with the application managers and said, hey, you application manager, you have these data concepts in your application, and here's your data owner. And when you do it by product, a lot of the applications align to product also. So it was a fairly simple thing to do. It got people heads wrapped around like, oh, I get it. It's pretty aligned to how we work day to day to day. And so that's what we did. I'm making it sound really simple. It was really hard to get there.
Start small.
It was really, really hard to get there. And we did. We started with, hey, credit card data. We're a financial services institution. You understand credit card data? Yeah, oh yeah, I understand that. I know what you're talking about, Karen. Okay, this person is in charge of credit card. Oh, okay. So and then we built and built and built. Now we even have boundary problems with that though. Hey, when does collections, call center, AML, KYC intersect with credit card data? Who owns it? Okay, all right. Or when credit card data goes into our regulatory reports and our finance department or our risk department is using it, who owns it? So there's still, lots of conversations of, hey, when we give it to you and you change it, guess what? You own it. With a lot of conversations around that risk, you now own this data that you merged with these 3 other fields and created something out of that's not our data anymore, it's your data. And you need to declare owner for that and manage it to the right standards also. So that chain is also really important to declare guidelines and rules around and get agreements and handshakes.
Yeah, but start small.
Yeah, start with simple things.
Yeah, find a domain that you can go after. Maybe the person is already well known. That
Yes.
also helps as well, which is people go to them anyway.
Yeah.
And start there, and then brag about their success. Like let people know, let management know like what's different and what things they've caught. Get them to keep up with things that are different since they've been in the role. And it is going to continue to evolve. Like we are just having that conversation now about you create it, you own it. You take you take 3 fields from Peter, me, and Karen, and you've created something new. You are now the owner, and people understand that.
Yeah.
And so, but you're not going to get there on day one. No.
And if it starts to look too easy, the actual ownership piece is that they own the requirements. They don't actually own the data themselves. And so when they start to get the idea that the requirements are part of what they have to do, then they realize it's really hard. And you can own the requirements from the time it comes here until the time it leaves our well-defined business process and goes into this other business process. Great discussion so far. Again, just schedule-wise, I'm going to ask Chris to get ready to come up here in just a minute. But I would like you guys to talk a little bit about succession planning. And I'm in my last term as president of DAMA. I get termed out at this point. And my number one job is to find another president. It's very, very simple in that sense, right? And I'm going to ask these two to comment on that. And then we'll have brief commercial. We'll take a little bio break and finish off the coffee and things like that. But let's have your thoughts on succession planning.
Go ahead. You have a lot of successes.
Yeah. So it's actually an annual process for me to think through succession planning because things evolve very, very much every year. And I usually have multiple pipes. I don't depend on like one person because depending when I leave, the business could need something different than what I provided. It could be in a very different spot. So I always like to have options. I'm always also talking to my team members, my leaders, like, hey, what do you want to do? Are you interested in being the next me, or are you actually not and you want to go do something else? So that is also part of succession planning too, is making sure that you're very, very in tune to what your leaders are wanting to do. And actually, there are people on my succession plan that aren't even in my organization, and I've had to have conversations with them and saying, hey, I think your next jump would be, you're doing this today, but I think your next jump is something more aligned to over here. Would you be interested? So having those type of conversations is super important. Taking out your leaders and seeing what else they need to develop to be ready. And this is going to take easily a couple years to get them ready and have exposure. Getting them exposure to the senior leaders that they're going to be working with, so they feel comfortable, is also part of it. It's not a hey, just put a person's name down and you're done. It's a evolving situation that you kind of always need to be managing, both on because it's a people problem, and it's also like a cultural problem, and it's a what do we need now in this role problem. Yeah, I'm always looking. We also have succession for my role, and it's part of what I do when I'm out talking to people, which is I'm trying to say is Mike will be the guy, right? I'm not gonna have that conversation right now with Michael or with Craig, but I'm looking and I'm listening for those skills that have that versatility, no matter what the agenda is, that they can step in and giving people a chance. And by the way, when they say, no, I'm not interested in your job, and I get that, by the way, but I ask why. Because it's interesting. One of the folks that I have worked with said, not right now. I have small children, and that is important to me to be able to be there. But what I hear is a solvable problem. It really doesn't matter. I'm not trying to take this person away from their family. It is they see things that obstacles that I'm running into, and they're not sure they're ready for that. So that gives me an area of focus of, okay, we need to work on that. They already have the visibility with senior leadership. That's not the challenge. It's just how do you overcome the culture problem, and don't drive into the culture problem, but go around the sides of the culture problem. And so once again, it's always looking, but once again, I'm not necessarily looking for a data expert. They're harder to come by, because I think a lot of what Karen and I bring to this party is we've done it all. I know everything that can go wrong with data, and so do you. And now, because there are people like you all in this room who have helped prevent a lot of those problems, you don't have the same training base. And so I have to change my expectations of what I'm looking for in people, because they may not have had as many bad data problems as I had. And by the way, it's still Peter and I, and Peter's a professor at VCU. He's also DAMA International's president. And Peter and I keep talking about the importance of data literacy, the importance of helping students see bad data. I'm looking at Giovanni as I say this. How they come out of college and they've never seen bad data. What? Come on. And I'm like, no, it's messy in there. And any new organization you work in where there hasn't been a data leader, there's a swamp somewhere, maybe little, maybe big. But it would behoove us to actually give our students who come along that experience, because it may not be in the workplace anymore, but you learn how to fix it. You learn the things you have to look for. Somebody said to me one day, they said, you have this amazing ability to see around corners. I'm like, already been around the corner, already fell in the open manhole. I know what's there. I've lived 1,000 lives, and I'm very blessed that I've lived them, and people have taught me and picked me up and kept me going over the years. But I think it's really looking for those intellectual curiosity, those analytical skills, those influencing skills, and know who they are, right? And you never want a slate of one. Like, you want a broad slate. Somebody may be 5 years away, but you want to be taking care of them. You want to start giving them some exposure, maybe not at the top of the house, but the middle of the house where they can have influence. And so it's realizing there's going to be a long lead time for some. But, if you won the lottery tomorrow, I always say I'd stay, but we see. Caribbean might be calling my name. At least for a little bit, right?
Well, I used to get in trouble. So I got in trouble because I used to say, what happens if you get run over by a bus? And people are like, that's a really morbid example, Kathy. And I'm like, they said, you should use if somebody won the lottery. And so I don't use the morbid example anymore. But I do think it's important that, you need to constantly, whether you're the middle data leader or the senior, if you're the middle data leader, does your senior data leader know you want their job? It's a conversation you should be having. And by the way, you don't have to go, Karen, I want that job. But it's like, hey, like things that I'd like to work on, which is, what would I need to focus on in the next 3 to 5 years to be considered a successor for you? So if you're in that role, you can ask. But if you're not asking your people, you should be. And by the way, I'll talk to anybody about data leadership. And it's surprising. I actually found one at dinner one night. We worked elsewhere in the company, and I just has the same sort of intuitive skills. And I was like, they'd be really great. Not a big fan of policies and rules. So you got to, that's the thing to work on.
I think you hear, though, the nature of the formalness of the process that really has to be followed. And if you're not, again, actively out there looking for it, it's going to be a problem. First of all, let's stop here real quick and thank both of you for a first half that's been really great so far. So, Chris, if I can get you to come on up here. And our next topic we're going to talk about is strategy. And I do want to do a quick little intro to this. There's lots of people that have been talking data strategy. And my friend John Ladley says, well, your data strategy should be the data chapter of your corporate strategy. That's actually a pretty good way of describing it. One of the things to look at, though, is that we didn't actually use the word strategy in business until about 1950. And that's when management consultants figured out it was something that might be really interesting for them. Is my phone talking to me? Oh, Siri's talking to me. So this becomes, of course, this grand piece where you have 1,000 pages and 100 PowerPoint slides and all this sort of thing. And I really think this is the wrong way to think about strategy. And going back to sort of first principles, strategy in the hands of management consultants is a thing. But if you look at it in the context of the Army, the military derives it from this very simple definition. It's a pattern in a stream of decisions. And in that sense, data strategy is more of a process than it is a thing. And with that, I'll turn it back over to our two wonderful speakers and ask them to comment and see how that's played a role in their environments. And again, keep your questions coming. This is going really well.
I was just telling Kathy, I'm like, man, he just messed me up with that definition. What the? Okay, come on, Peter, you gotta give us the preamble on these things. Yeah. Okay, so what's I'm still thinking about it's a process, not a.
So let me give you an example. You guys all know the trolley problem, right? Somebody's going to go down, you pull a lever, and you're either going to kill 5 people or one person's going to get killed. This is our introduction to ethics that we all use in this. If corporate...
Wow. Okay, Peter's just like, okay, so Karen and I are both officially off center right now. Keep going, Peter.
If corporate says always kill 1 person instead of 5, that's a pattern in a stream of decisions. Walmart does this very effectively. You guys all know what Walmart's strategy is. Everyday low price. And everything at Walmart is guided by those 4 specific words. So this is the essence here. In the military, they have this, we can't come up with a plan for every time every soldier is going to run into any particular situation. And trying to be comprehensive about it tends not to work. So that's sort of where I'm. Does that help a little, Karen?
Okay. No, I got it now. Woo! All right, good. I'm going to follow your lead here because I'm not there yet. Data actually is a really good example of you probably do need to have both versions of this. All right, and I'm doing this on the fly, unprepared. Because data can go down lots of different avenues and a lot of things can go wrong with data because it is a very live thing that happens every single moment of your company. And this is where your data management processes come in, and you need to have processes in place to push it along the right avenues. And this is how you need to teach your hundreds or tens, 20s, hundreds, thousands of people to think about what's the right thing to do in that moment. And you have, your processes and your way of thinking, your guidelines and everything to get people to generally agree on, hey, these are the actions I'm going to take on a daily basis when certain things happen. So like the military, we in the data field need to be thinking about the same things. Things go wrong every day. Now, you also need to have a normal definition of a strategy, which aligns then to your business strategy. Hey, what is my business trying to accomplish? How does my my data strategy support that strategy? What is the plan to actually implement that? And that is your change vehicle, meaning I have my everyday occurrence. You can't stay every day. You have to always transform, always have to change. Well, how do I using my strategy, attached to the business strategy, to transform my business and change my everyday? So I think both apply. You need to have that master plan that attached to the business strategy, and you need to have your day-to-day operating model to handle what's coming in the door to you.
Yeah, and we call that our roadmap. So that's kind of the path I take forward, which is, to me, the strategy is very high level and attached to the business. And for the most of us, our businesses don't change strategy on a weekly, monthly, annual basis. And so having that alignment, but I also think that having a 75-page document that nobody ever looks at may not be useful. So I did try to keep mine simple and to the point, and then lay the roadmap up underneath that so we know what we're doing, because that will change. Things that are important this year will hopefully accomplish, and I will have a whole different set of items on my roadmap next year for that. So I would just caution you that 75-page documents are difficult for people to consume. Typically, I don't know, you may have a 75-page.
No, I don't have a 75-page.
I have seen them. No, I don't have them. And like I said, I want to be able to do it in an elevator speech in 15 seconds. Like what are we, what is the process that we are trying to?
We have a one-pager, super easy to communicate what the strategy is, what our objectives are, and actually that hasn't actually changed materially in 3 years, because it's like two good things, like with your data. We do have, not because we want to have it, but we do have a 3-year master plan, but we're kind of forced to do that because of the regulatory environment.
Can't blame me this time.
I know, I'm not blaming you this time. Last time I could.
Okay, so I have to break you in on the joke. Yeah. Karen and I did RVA Tech last year.
I think 2 years.
Probably 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And she was talking about, because it is public knowledge that there is a consent order around data management. And we were on stage, and at the time I was working at the Federal Reserve, and I just sort of leaned forward and I went, did we do that? And she goes, yeah, you did. So I'm not there, didn't do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the Richmond.
It's nice to have you back on the, light side of data
instead of the regulatory side.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's nice to sit on, sometimes it's good to sit on the other side to
see how they think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should pick your brain. Yeah. Okay. All right. Note. So, anyways, okay, that's the way off. We went off tangent there, didn't we?
That's okay. I find it's really hard, though, to explain this concept to leaders upstream. And really the key is, how is data going to help us achieve our strategic objectives? And that's got to come back to faster, better, cheaper, or less risk, right? One of those 4 pieces. And it makes a difference which one you optimize on. And so you guys have any tools, or the one-pager sounds like a real nice thing. I'm sure everybody here like to see a one-pager, By the way, it takes you a long time to write a one-pager, doesn't it?
It does take you a long time, like many iterations. And this is a conversation like literally having right now, every day, with the CEO of our wealth division, for example. Hey, what's your business strategy? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals? What's your targets? Our data is a problem. Okay. Why is our data a problem? What are you trying to do? Like, what do you want to do with that data? Why is it causing you problems? I've just been told that our data is the problem. You need to fix it. Okay. Let me go back again. What are your business objectives? And how can I fix the data to help you meet your business objectives? That it's very, very difficult for people sometimes to understand that data doesn't sit alone. And I can't just fix data. It's not a standalone strategy. It is I attach the data to your business strategy. I meet your business strategy so you can show that progress. And a lot of times through lots of conversations. Sometimes me being very insistent that they need to tell me more. You need to tell me more. You need to tell me more. You need to tell me more. Well, and it's the art of so I'm going to add one more skill set. We talked about skill sets. Being able to ask those questions, right? I often get that, right? The data's broke. Okay, wait a minute. So tell me what you're trying to do. Like, what is it taking too long? Are you not getting the insights that you're looking for? And being able to just sort of peel that apart. Because if you can lead with questions, you can generally get them to narrow down of what their problem is, but they can't speak to you in data. They can just speak to you on what they've heard. Your data's a problem. Okay, well, there's not much I can do with that. Yeah. I just giggle when you say that because I've heard that before. Yeah. And a lot of times it's, people are spending their time, sorry, this is my word I continue to use, wrangling data because it's bad. It's not fit for purpose where it comes out of. So I've got to go back and clean up those names, or I've got to clean up so I can match account numbers. And it's like, if people are doing that, then they're not spending their time saying, hey, LaToya, guess what? I just found this really cool thing. Because they're so far busy back here. And by the way, by the time they finish it, they're on to next month's. Yeah. And I've heard that story over and over again from people that I've talked to, organizations that I've been at. And so I think making sure that you understand what problem you're solving, I think is the big opportunity. So.
Let's move on. We don't seem to have questions on that. Unlocking business. Oh, I'm sorry. LaToya, please hang on.
I just called her out, so she's okay.
Hi, my name is LaToya Brown. I'm with Women in Data here in the DMV and Richmond area. And I want to just say you guys are on point with what is the data problem and helping people describe it. And this is not my question, but I do have the experience of working in an organization where they said the data is broken. But having to drill down into from whose perspective and what specifically is the problem that you're running into. And so getting those answers are really valuable. So thank you. My question is related to strategy. Have you had to handle when senior leadership has challenged your strategy, your data strategy, and whether it aligns with the organization's overall business strategy? And were you able to influence them, or did you need to change direction?
Yes to everything. Usually, yeah. I'm going to say no because I spend so much time up front. Oh, wow. Trying to make sure it's set for. You never had like a new business leader come in and say, hey, no, really? Okay. I have that. You and I need to chat. Yeah. I have that happen all the time. Like, new CEO and taking it in a different direction. And yeah, that happens. Yeah. But when that does happen, it does happen. Leaders change, and in corporate America, leaders change often. And that's usually a trigger to say they're likely going to change the business strategy also. They're likely going to want to transform something. So at that point, you're like, okay, eyes and ears open because we're about ready to go on a different journey. And so they're going to want to know current state. And so you're going to want to share, hey, here's my current state. Here's the direction. Here's what we've been doing. And they're going to want to pick it apart because they've been brought in to change something. And so you just got to be open to that experience. It's not a personal thing. It's a business thing. And so we go through this, I'd say, every year, way too often, every 18 months of like, hey, we need to refresh. And so it does cause problems from a consistency perspective, traction perspective, like how do I actually achieve an actual end result? Because data does take a long time to get results. And so how do you guard against the flavor of the day, making traction and solving their business problems? How do you pair it together is the complex problem that we deal with.
Well, and spread your net wide when you're asking the questions, like what are the problems? And that's where I think I end up getting support is I did some consulting work many years ago, and it was interesting because I went into the organization and the person said, well, this is the problem. That's cute. But I didn't stop there, right? And so, but I went out and talked to a bunch of folks across the business, and it turned out the problem was not that they had a unique problem in their mortgage business. It was data was scattered all over the place because they bought a bunch of banks. And people were spending all their time just trying to get the data into house. So don't settle with Karen, what's your problem? And then I get Karen to tell me, I finally get her there. But like, who are the people next to Karen? Who are the people below Karen? Who are her data analysts? Talk to the boots that are on the ground, because if you do that, generally you'll true into something that will cover the expanse time that you want it to. But it is definitely one. And business leaders do come and go. But that's once again why the one pager to me is so much easier. And I will say I haven't had anybody challenge it. Maybe I will say it's been ignored.
I don't know if actually the one pager they always nod their head because it's always like, okay, this makes sense. It's hard to argue.
Yeah.
It's probably more, I'll say, the data architecture that people challenge, because that's when it gets into more opinions or the how or the that's not how we do things, or that's not how I want to do things. So the I word. So maybe that's a strategy. It's more the architecture that, oh gosh, those are really fun conversations.
And it's fun when they don't really know much about it and they start to delve in your backyard.
Okay, when you have a business person trying to
going.
architect, I'm like, what are you doing? Am I trying to dictate to you how you do your marketing campaign? Why are you trying to tell the architect how to architect this? So sometimes it's just getting people to play in the right lanes.
But it's not reacting in the moment too. So that's another big thing, which is when you're challenged, just ask more questions. It's like, okay, great, like tell me more. And sometimes you end up getting that, well, you need to go talk to Peter, who knows more. Okay, great, go talk to Peter. Make sure you follow back up with the person that challenged you originally. And if you can, bring Peter with you, who brings clarity to that conversation. And generally Karen will, in her business leader role, will go, oh. So a lot of times people dramatize data. It's fascinating. It's all wrong.
It's a really easy target. People just love complaining about it. It's so easy.
Yeah. Maybe I think because nobody understands it.
Yeah,
so
it's data. Yeah,
it's broken.
It's broken. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So fun.
If anybody knows the answer to that test question, we'd like to know why data is always the victim.
Let me just ask you a little bit. Last month, DAMA hosted Barb Wixom talked about creating value from data, and I'd be curious in your two roles, how much do you participate with business units that are trying to create value, and then she also differentiated creating value versus realizing value versus actually selling data products, as somebody mentioned earlier. One of our guests spoke about getting value out of that. Can you describe your involvement in that process of creating and realizing value?
Okay, so we always, I'll say this is the best practice we try to do. We always partner with some data consumer that's trying to create value. And we always ask them, well, what are you trying to accomplish and what does success look like and how are you going to measure it? Most of the time they can't answer those questions. And then we actually have a set of processes we go through to get clarity on those questions before we start work. Because without the clarity on those questions, things kind of go sideways. So that, to me, like the structured problem solving is really, really key when working with your analytical partners, your data scientists, your business partners. You got to get them to structure the problem so that the hands-on keyboard people that need to build things can do it the right way with the right why and what does success look like. So that's. I mean, yes, we do this every day.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always looking for those too. Like there are times where I see things maybe that the business folks don't see. And so it's making them aware And or as Karen said, right, they come and they don't have the problem structured or how it's going to create value. But it's, once again, always making sure that they're the headliners and that you're there to help them, whether it's structuring the problem or actually helping them see, hey, we could do this. I mean, one of the things that I found recently is one of my business partners, who I think the world of, he had gone out and found the government site where they have good products available. And I was like, wow, that's awesome, because I had folks that I was working with who didn't understand what a data product was. And so sometimes also just kind of pointing people at the art of the possible, you can actually get them to come to the table and go, oh my gosh, we could do that. And here would be the value it would bring. And so that's another piece that I feel like we have in our toolbox of helping them understand that. But yes, I do have found
both
can't
of
structure them.
can't structure them. And your point about support, like we are a support organization. That is the nature of our business. And so a lot of times they do come and they want like us to own it. And I'm like, no, actually we won't own it. We want you to own it, and that we get skin in the game along the way, and that we're here to support you and your goals. And so that turns the tables a little bit into like commissioning work versus like being in there problem solving we do. So like, yeah, definitely I agree with you on that, Kathy.
I ask a follow-on, which is, how old are you?
Sorry, Paul.
So that's okay. Karen, you said something I think that's really important is, you ask a lot of questions, right? Yeah. And then the idea is there's lots of creativity out there, but then there's also a lot of discipline in saying, that one's not going to work, right? How much do you use data to communicate that message? I mean, there's a hypothesis out there, right? It's like, and then it's like, what's the first thing you do?
We try to celebrate failures. Like, it's okay, you try something, you had a hypothesis, you tried it, it didn't work, tell us why it didn't work, and what are you doing about it? Like, what are you going to try next? How are you going to learn from it? And so we do ask that. I ask my team, I tell my team, like, hey, that's okay. It's what you do with it that matters, not the fact that it didn't work. So you hope in the analytical communities and the business, they're going to have failures too. They're going to, right? Half of using data is there's always a simple probability that it's not going to work as long as it is going to work. And so how you lessen it is the key. So you're not going to avoid it.
We have another question from Jasmeet.
Thank you. Thank you for a very frank conversation. I've really enjoyed this morning. I just had one question around how do you, like, at times so I'm in the data science part of the data world, and so at times we'll hear from business that we don't know how our clients are doing, we don't have enough insights and all that stuff, and we're like, hey, we built like 3 dashboards, we've given you a couple of models, like these results, we have done these projects. You're not like trying to solve a rocket science problem here. We like similar problems keep changing. So how do you balance that kind of like asking them, challenging them in terms of like, what did you execute on what I provided you last December versus you asking me to like saying in an open forum, I don't have insights and we can't do anything because of that. So how do you balance that? Keep spitting out more stuff rather than challenging them to execute on what you said.
So that's a data-driven challenge, I think. And actually, I was talking to a couple of people, about. And by the way, if anybody has the secret, but I'd love to answer this test question. But Karen and I both, and several people in this room. I'm sorry, I got to do it. How many folks here have worked at Capital One in some way, shape, or worked? Yes. Amazing. Very telling. So I think the thing the thing I think I took for granted when I left there was that the whole rest of the world was data driven. Like, I didn't go to anybody with a hypothesis or a dashboard or anything without knowing that I was going to get asked, what's the so what of this? And most of the time it's where I spent all my time. I swore when I left Capital One that I was going to uninstall PowerPoint from every machine in my house, because that's how you communicate, right? And to me, I think a lot of times we think of dashboards as being data driven. They're not. It's like, I remember when Capital One bought Chevy Chase, and the VF Saul was the president. He could take a page of numbers and he could find the outlier on the page. It was a stunning skill. I had never seen anybody sort of do that. And it was an interesting thing because the thing that when I was working with the folks that came over from Chevy Chase was, to be data driven, you actually have to pull all those insights out and tell people, here's the thing you need to care about, Karen. And if somebody's got to go through a bunch of rows and columns, they're just not going to go there. And so I think, a couple things on this, which is from a dashboarding perspective, there's probably an opportunity to sit down to see if the dashboards are talking to them, right? We used to laugh about if you stop sending out a report with anybody calling you,
it wouldn't notice. Just turn it off. See your calls. That's a common technique, and we still use today.
Yes. I actually mentioned that the other day in a meeting.
Yep.
But I think sitting down with the people who are supposed to be your consumers of these dashboards and saying, is it meeting their needs? But I also think there's a second piece of this. Are you measuring all the right things? And that to me is about being data driven. And not every organization sort of understands. It's like, okay, if I ask you who your top 10 customers are, well, maybe you could spiel them off, but my next question is, what dimensions are you measuring them on? That is being data driven. Just because you can tell me who your top 10 are, if I asked you through a different window of, well, how many of them are critical? Could you answer my question as quickly? And so it's one of those of, have you sat down with the dashboards and talked to people to understand and create that relationship where you can say, what did you all find? You mentioned that, right, within this dashboard.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the structured problem solving. When you set the dashboard, finding out, well, what problem are we trying to solve and what was the success metrics for that problem and how is this dashboard going to help that problem. The other thing I find is that there are problems that are kind of once and done problems, like you do the analysis, you had a hypothesis, people set dashboards on it, but the business has moved on and they're not going to use that in their normal operating business. So knowing the type of asset you're creating and for what purpose is really important. Even on my team, Adam's on my team.
Hi, Adam.
Welcome. Adam actually had a question for me, like, hey, Karen, did you know we're producing all these reports and spending hundreds of hours for you on a weekly basis? And can we go through that with you to say, which is the most important one? It's like, well, absolutely.
Yes.
I had no idea. So putting that context around, like, no business leader wants to waste their team's time. And they probably just aren't aware of the time and effort it's creating. So asking the questions like, what do you care about? How are you measuring it? How do you want to measure it? What is the goal? What's the target for that metric? So that when we achieve that target, what's going to happen? To operationalize it in the way it works, in the way they actually work their business. That's hard because most people think of a report as the end product. No, the report isn't the end product. It is a means to inform something else, a decision, a business process, an error. It's informing something. And if it's not informing something, it's just going to sit on the shelf. And that's a mind shift for most people. Yeah. And in a world where everybody knows how to use Python, the numbers every organization I've gone into, the number of reports, the number of dashboards is quite stunning. And I think everybody wants to know, like, why don't I hear anything out of it? And I think your point about length of life, which is, this is just something we're trying to get to a point in time and we should retire it? Or is this something that, one of the things that I found over time is people want it to evolve. And it's having that conversation with people, which is this useful?
And are there other things you'd like to see? I actually had like a rolling door coming through when I was an analyst of, hey, could you also do this? And could you also do that? They'll never stop. They'll never stop.
It never.
And that's
stops.
what you want, is them never to stop.
Yeah.
I very seldom find dashboards or reports that should stay static.
Yeah.
Except for my data quality ones. And they're going to have to be there forever because we're always bringing new data in the front door.
Yeah.
I need to know whether or not we have quality data coming in. So.
We've got another question back here.
Hey, Kathy and Karen, Shailesh here. So I want to pull the thread a little bit more forward. How would you quantify the valuation of data in regards to the whole business value? So do you treat your organizations as service organizations or internal consulting organizations and create a chargeback model to stake a claim in the business value that your business is looking to generate, and then that way connect the dots? Or I think you talked about the life cycle of the data and life cycle of a report. Like, how is there a way your organizations are thinking about quantifying that valuation, saying, hey, we are producing 10% of what you are generating as a business value, so we are kind of contributing a percentage in the overall profitability of your bottom lines?
No, I know that's a lot of people are like, hey, you should do chargeback, you should quantify the value you're bringing. We don't do that. I usually people are trying to do that are still trying to sell the value of data. And that could be a technique to do that. Fortunately for me, I'm an organization that understands the value of data and what it can do. And so it's not as fruitful. I don't need to do it. They know. Luckily, I feel very fortunate for that, though. Yes. Yeah. And if you work for a company that does understand the value of data, it's priceless. Yes. And when I say understands, like all the way to the top of the house, I'm very blessed to work for an organization that does, as is Karen. And I do think it goes to the maturity of the organization. If you're selling, it's really hard. It goes back to Peter where we started today, which is why do CDOs not have a long tenure in their jobs? Because it is really hard. And I do not charge back for my services, but I think like you, because you said there are thousands of people across the city that do this work. The way that we focus on it is I'm trying to build those skills for the enterprise as a whole. And I actually have data experts in every one of our divisions who are carrying that torch for their divisions. They're closer to it. They know what needs to be done. I'm also in front of our senior leaders weekly, if not more, saying what value we're bringing on a day-to-day basis. So they're really aware of what we're working on, what value are bringing. We're sending out them like we just accomplished this huge thing. So with that like engagement, they're not questioning the value of the team because they're seeing it throughout the whole year, which is important. Most of the time, it's when I need something, they're like, "How can we help you, Karen?" Or "How do we pull? What do you need? What barrier can I remove?" That to me is what's going to set us up for success. That's why I try to do for my team. Like my whole job is to get rid of barriers for them so they can get on with it and deliver what we need to deliver. It's hard. How many folks here feel like they're at the beginning of this journey? It's a hard road. I'm going to tell you. The job I'm in now, I was not the first. It's the only time I haven't been the inaugural data officer. And they did a lot of great work. And so it's really kind of interesting. And this is the book that Peter and I are someday going to write. Hopefully, Karen, you'll help us out. But it's like trying to look back over, like, what's the right way to start? And like get things off the ground. And I think you can go, I would always caution, never go big, never try to conquer the whole elephant in one bite. But I think it is really more around, can you find a legitimate problem and fix it and make it grow from there versus trying to get it all. So there's some real important management report that's got a bunch of data quality problems. Okay, you may not be able to get the perfect solution, or but like, can you get started? Or you go into an organization, they don't know where their data is. Oh. You have an inventory? An inventory?
What? What? Catalog?
A catalog? And so you may not want to start off with a multi-million-dollar purchase, but to the point of the conversations we heard during the breaks, right? Can you start? Can you just create something in Excel? You know, get something going where people go, oh, this is awesome. Like, I didn't know this stuff was here. I could use that data, Karen, thanks. And so I think, once again, you know, realizing the culture of your organization, where they're at, where their problems are. And I'm always kind of curious and learning if people have tricks of the trade, but I've not actually found, here's the best way to go about it.
I don't think there's a magic formula.
I wish there was. If it was, Karen and I would be like,
well,
really
we wouldn't
wealthy.
have, you know, worry about your job. Like every 18 months, you know, people are departing.
A theme that I've heard throughout the whole conversation, we appreciate it. I mean, what knowledge that you have is amazing. But the theme that I've heard is in Peter's book is data literacy, but it's more than literacy. I've talked to 3-4-star generals and said, you need to use acumen, and it's starting to hit in DOD now is acumen. And a lot of people recognize it. A lot of people think data literacy is the ability to find the mean of a data set. That's out there. There's a whole lot of people doing that. There's good programs, there's bad programs. I mean, there's one thing about senior leadership of what do I do with my data? How do I manage the risk? How do I get the ROI, the programmatic piece of it? And then there's the day-to-day piece of, in the military, how do I make data-driven decisions? No one's ever taught it. Peter says it all the time. We teach people how to build Oracle databases. We don't teach people. We don't teach people how to make data decisions. It's not, and if you don't know it, you can't do it if you've never been taught. So my question is why and how, as far as data acumen. And kind of those two kind of separating, because it is a program, it's a service that gets provided. Like you said, you might not charge back. Don't get into chargebacks. Like they said, not good. But you have to be effective in your service in order to continue and make effective and efficient decisions for the business. So, like I said, I've seen that. I've heard the theme the whole way through today. I'd like to hear how you, what you do, why you do it, and then how you go apart doing that.
I'll take a whack. All right. So to me, like, there isn't like one road. When thinking about data literacy and how to teach it and data skills, you actually have to think of the persona of who you are, who you're trying to teach, and how you want them to influence them. When we started our data governance, data management journey at Citi, after getting the consent order, we realized that one, we had a senior leader data literacy problem. Very, 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 very different than a second problem around, hey, do we have the right hands-on data skills needed in our teams to elevate the types of data governance and management practices we need to do. Different persona, like hands-on team doers. And then a third persona may be, hey, does our tech teams understand what good looks like in terms of the expectations of how to manage data also? So, and I'll say last persona is your data consumers, the users of the data, people making data science products or reports. Do they understand the content of the actual data itself? We have all these problems. Then there's not one avenue or channel or a, senior leader is going to get the same thing as our data consumers. They don't care about the same things, as we treat it all very, very differently. I did work with a change management person to help identify the different personas, people, and then say, okay, first, we started with our senior leaders. They did not.
Important place to
Yes,
start.
we started with our senior leaders. We had an all-day session with the most senior leaders at Citi, teaching them about data. What's the authorized data scores? What is the data quality rule? What, like, literally what good looks like. And that really general big blocks of concepts. They still use those big blocks to say, I get what you're saying now, Karen, or, oh, yes, I know what the ADS is now, Karen. I don't have it yet. So they get it now. We have a different channel around skill development for our team members in terms of coding practices, how do you write a good data quality rule, you name it. Data content, that's my last area that I'm trying to get over the hurdle is how do we educate our consumers around the data content? Because data misuse is one of the root causes for many, many, many problems. And it starts with the consumer not understanding, even if they're reading the catalog and the metadata, they're not understanding what that truly means and how to use it appropriately. So it's not it is a huge strategy in itself and a huge program itself to get you where you want to be in a multiple year journey.
Yeah, I completely agree with the personas. That is super important. By the way, the consumer thing is part of what I've been working on is how do we empower the consumers to have a voice, to speak up and connect with their producers, know who their producers are, make sure they understand, not just the catalog, but like make sure they understand what they're looking at. But I have a question for you. So you used the term data literacy. Peter used it earlier. I've actually steered off those words.
I don't use that word either. So,
And I'll say why, because if you're not data literate,
it makes you like
illiterate.
Yeah, you're like you're making them feel like an idiot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
I don't use those words.
So once again, think about how people are hearing what we're saying, that we're using a term like data literacy.
Yeah.
And I don't think, I've not seen it work. I've always steered off of it. I've talked about a data-driven culture or a data culture or whatever. So once again, not trying to pick, just want to raise awareness within the room. That is, when you said it earlier, I was like, ugh. Just because I've watched people when you say, we're going to do a data literacy program.
Not going to that because that sounds pretty boring.
Yes.
Sorry.
So what banner did you run, the one you did with your senior executives? You really didn't call it a data literacy program with your senior executives.
Well, again, luckily for me, it was a little bit of a holy crap where we have a problem on our hands and I don't understand the problem. So it's great. Take advantage of the emergencies that occur as elevation points for you to get your point across. Because at that point, they knew they had a problem. They clearly okay, you clearly understand what the problem is. Teach the rest of us. So it was well received. It wasn't like we were going in and teaching them. We're like, hey, we're going to have a day on data because it's a big problem for the company. Let's talk about what good looks like so that we all get on board with what we need to do.
Yeah, can't emphasize enough. How many folks here work in a regulated industry or do consulting for regulated? Use those regulatory moments to actually use that as a platform.
Yeah.
And once again, make sure you put it in scale. Don't sort of say, I'm going to solve all your problems, but use it to get the funding, the support, the buy-in. And by the way, if you don't get your senior leadership engaged, you're going to be fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
Like all the really smart data people in this room, if our boss and our boss's boss don't actually know and we don't have their support, we're not going to get very far. We're just going to be really noisy people. And so find a way to get in front of senior leadership. Once again, regulatory matters do matter to them. But you know, there are other things where you may have a company that's struggling from a revenue perspective. It's a great time to sort of say, hey, there are probably a couple little things we could do that might turn that around, or cost her out through. Use that as a platform to say, hey, I see some things that are going on and I have some ideas that could save us some money if we do a little investment.
Yeah, I also found that taking a little concept and doing it a little bit at a time. We did do it all day, but then afterwards we still have like every month we get together and I'm like, okay, what are we going to, inform our wonderful seniors about, like educate them a little bit. It doesn't feel like it. We talk and we take one page every council and kind of go, hey, here's a concept. You may have heard us talk about this. This is why this is important. And so we try to do that just to little by little, over time, get them more data.
You mentioned council. I got to pick it up, Peter.
Yeah.
So talk about data councils. Like, how did y'all?
Yeah. So,
Take the mic away from you, Peter.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We do have data councils. And so what we did is say, hey, data is not a Karen problem. It is not. Data is everyone's problem. And so we formed a data council to make sure accountability sat with the business leaders and with the technology leaders. And that my job is to inform them of areas of opportunity and hopefully a roadmap to help them be successful. And it's a great forum to, one, tout great work that's happening. Hey, we've been really successful here. Here's what happened. Here's what the results were. We talk about obviously risk and issues. Things are not going so well, where we need their help, and we make explicit ask of the senior leaders. I need more resources. I need tech. I need X, Y, and Z. And we also talk about investments that we want to make. We believe we need to be invested in these things for this purpose. Are you aligned? Are you not aligned? What do we want to do? So all the
senior people.
Yeah, the CEO of each of the businesses and their direct reports, and then the tech leader.
So hear that message.
CIO.
It's important that those people feel engaged and a part of.
Yep. They're the decision makers. Yeah, and we say you're the decision maker. We're going to lay out what we think the right options are. We're going to lay it out, but it's your decision. Sometimes they say no. Sometimes they say yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they give you a lot of feedback.
Sometimes they say maybe later.
Yeah.
Maybe later's okay.
Yeah, maybe later's okay. All the feedback's actually very, very helpful because you kind of get in their mind of what they care about, and then you make the alignment. You align to their strategy. They're ultimately your customer, your boss. You're providing this to them.
Yep. We're service.
Now, I will say that there are times I am the governance arm, and I have to tell them that they're wrong. No.
And I have metrics to back that up.
Yes. That would not meet the regulatory requirements that we need to meet, and so I'm not going to allow you to do that. So, but that's okay. They're like, oh, okay. Usually they're not doing it from malintent. They're usually doing it because they just don't know.
Sorry, Peter, I'll go back to you.
That's okay. We're
I just
down.
had to ask her. She mentioned the word council.
Yeah.
We're-
Do you not have a council? Do you have a council?
Yeah, I have several.
Yeah.
I have architecture review.
Yeah, we have architecture council, business process council, data council. We have all. Yeah.
All mine are engaged by senior leaders.
And that's separate from governance, right?
We mean separate from governance.
Or is that your governance?
There's definitely governance aspects to the
Okay,
council.
good.
Like there's only so many times you can pull them together,
Right.
and so you're like, okay, make it worth it. And so we tend to bundle things together because they're really, really busy people. Good.
For the record, I agree with both of them about literacy, even though that's the title of the book. But if you want to get found by the search engines, that's the sort of the world that we live in today. I want to just show a couple things as we move into ethics here. It's 10 minutes left, so of course we're going to hit ethics, right? So even Buzz Aldrin, when he was going to the moon, had to fill out a government travel voucher. It actually says, how's he getting there? What's going to happen? Who's furnishing the equipment? Where's he going to stay? All the rest of those sorts of things were just, fascinating on it. But it does lead to another really powerful lever that these two hold, which is that most people think ROI is return on investment, right? It also stands for So how do you guys approach those kinds of ethics discussions proactively as well as reactively?
I don't want to go to this conversation.
So I correlate risk of incarceration with my job is to keep my organization off the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And so helping people understand, I am responsible for privacy as well as the data governance and data tools and platforms. And I think anytime there, I mean, it's a complicated world that we live in because states have regulations about things you have to do. The federal government, and by the way, don't anybody say like one supersedes the other. It's the conglomeration of all of them. And there are financial penalties associated with that. And so, you know, once again, things happen, and you want to learn from them, as Karen said earlier, but where I'm trying to be is out in front so that people understand what is ethical and what is not. And it's a constant education process because it evolves.
Yeah, it is. We have the added challenge of every country has different regulatory environments also. And we do business in countries like China. So it's complicated. It's just really complicated. That's all I can say. And so we've tried to do things like, hey, list all the regulatory requirements, for things like privacy across every single area that we're doing business in. And is there a high water mark that you want to go for? But then you realize that high water mark is California, and there's
It's always California.
Yeah, and or either that or Switzerland. Actually, Switzerland's probably higher. Yeah, Switzerland is the ultimate high water mark. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, they do not allow any data to leave or come into that country. It's amazing. And so we've had to actually have patents on how to encrypt data now to make it happen. It's really cool. Wow. Anyways, it's complicated, and the high watermark is you can't afford it as a company. You can't elevate everyone because you degrade the revenues of your business. And so, how do you kind of do the right thing for the client, protect their data, use it wisely, meet all the regulatory environments in a cost-effective way? It's complicated. That's all I can say. But I think just doing the right thing is the key question. Are we doing the right thing? Are we using their data for good? Or would our clients be happy with the way we're using their data? Like, these are kind of questions you want to ask, especially if today consumers, because sometimes they don't make it real. They're analytical in nature.
Well, and also making sure that your third parties are using your data ethically.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yes. You're accountable for third parties and how they're dealing with your data.
I had a question about, your clients are making sure, you want to make sure your clients know you're taking care of their data and everything else. What's the client expectation that you're using their data to their benefit, to their financial benefit?
I think it's a personal thing too.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a single answer to that. Generations of people, like me personally, because I'm in it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want anyone using any of my data to do anything because I see all the bad. Yeah. And then there's other people like, use my data freely, use it to customize ads to me all you want. And, there's just a whole range of people out there with different thoughts about it. And that makes it difficult too.
But it brings back why you got to do the high watermark, which is you got to kind of go to that place where the person who's going to care, you're going to go, we did it the right way. Mm-hmm. And help make sure people understand what using data ethically means. Yeah. And a lot of times you can make it corollary. So how do you, you as a person, Karen, I know how you feel now. And so realizing that not everybody is, oh yeah, sure, put my data out there and I don't care. I will say I have 6 children, so they're all out of college, so I've done my thing. But we were sitting in my office the other day at home, and I was chatting we were talking about some tool, and my son-in-law is sitting in the chair, and he goes, I just got an ad for that tool. And I'm like, amazing. Oh, so creepy. And so that brings up my antenna a lot more of just, I probably haven't read the terms of agreement on somebody hasn't read the terms of agreement on their phone because clearly people are using my data more than.
Well, it's because it's in that fine print. Has anyone ever read that fine print? Yeah. You won't be able to use a phone without accepting it. So,
Hi, LaToya again. So I love what you said about meeting the standard of the individual who's the most concerned or, the most concerned. But I think there's also meeting the standards of the people who are most vulnerable. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, and I think yes, especially in financial services, there's obviously like a deep history that you want to avoid going forward, right? And so we have put in lots of I'll say monitoring programs to say, hey, are people using data appropriately to make really important decisions around people's financial well-being? And then not only the monitoring, but there's the first, second, third line of defense that's going on that questions how people are using the data in order to make sure that we're using it ethically to make some of the most important decisions in people's lives. So it is front and center. We have committees on it. It is of the utmost importance. Definitely. We got kind of sidetracked on privacy, but how people are using data to make key decisions is equally as important from an ethical perspective. I think we have more history on that we've learned from.
And there's more regulations.
Yeah, there's a lot of regulations, whereas some of the other newer areas, it's not as regulated, so it's more open, and that's why it's.
I think from the state's perspective, so I work mainly right now with healthcare data, and like you said, with history, there's so many vulnerable populations who become impacted almost like unbiased, or by quote unquote accident, or even just the history of our country. So there's that. But thank you.
I think also there is actually better tools out there now than there used to be. And so it's easier to detect, it's easier to protect. We've done a better job with the technology to help in that situation. I'm not saying nothing's going wrong, but I think we're just a lot more conscientious about it.
Well, and knowing where that data is and that it's tagged appropriately so people know when they're working with it and they understand the ramifications of working with sensitive data. And if it is traveling, it needs to be encrypted, and data does have to travel. Unfortunately, it has to get from point A to point B. And so as data professionals, I would say the big thing is making sure you know where it is, whether it's structured. The harder ones are semi-structured or the unstructured. And if you're in a regulated industry, they care about all three. And so once again, if you're not doing that yet, doing it going forward is a great place to start to make sure you know where your sensitive data is and who the consumers are of it. Because if you're in a small organization, if you can reach them and make sure they understand, hey, this data will be tagged, and you need to know this is okay and this is not. And don't assume they know.
No, they don't know.
They don't know. No. And it changes, right? New things come about.
But I love all the scanning technology we have. We have scanners that scan everything, every piece of email, everything that everyone does for it.
And one you
highlights it then.
Yeah, well, and one you don't think about, but I don't know if there are any developers in the room, but people may put secrets, passwords, or whatever in code. Those are other things you need to care about and educate people on. That's bad. You should not do that.
Yeah, I had how much time do we have? No, I shouldn't tell us that one. Oh, so many stories on that one.
Yeah.
I'm going to end on a cheery note. The studies actually of reading the fine print, 100% of them have the word other in it, which means you then have to go find the other in order to do it. And the guidance from people who do this now is don't bother reading it, which is even sadder. So this is going to continue to become an increasingly important role on this. But first of all, let me thank you both for sharing as much time. I'm pretty sure these guys would keep you here all day if we had the chance. That's not the deal we made with Cap Tech, so we do have to start putting the room back together so they can get back to business. But thank you for taking the time on this. We're going to try.
A couple of us were catching up. Carrie and I were catching up and then the engagement from you guys has been spectacular. So
thank you.
We really do appreciate that. It's worth the
investment. It makes it much more fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we want to thank you guys for coming. This is our second one. We hope to do this twice a year. So if you enjoyed it, come back, let your friends know. We'd like to make this a success. We love having the conversation. We like having people together.
And it costs how much, Carrie?
And it's free.
There we go. That's, yeah.
We also want to thank our sponsors, Capside. They're the reason that we can do this for free and why we have breakfast. So please, go see them on your way out. We do have room for another hour. If you guys want to hang out, chat, get to know some people, talk to our lovely presenters here. One of the things we want to do is build foster a sense of community. We have our monthly meetings you can invite to, but they're virtual. We can ask questions, but it's not the same as being face-to-face. So take the time to be face-to-face today, enjoy this, and hopefully we will see you at our next one in October.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.